Hey, welcome back to this episode of the Downline podcast, where we seek to help Christ followers faithfully walk with Jesus while pouring their lives into others. My name is Jamie Trussell, privileged to serving with Downline and as lead pastor of Redeemer Dripping Springs in the Austin area, joined today by one of my closest friends, Downline alum, real estate mogul, and former drug dealer, Jeff Howard. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, that's a good resume. Thanks for that intro.
No problem. I wrote it myself. And don't be fooled. Don't let the tattoos fool you. He's very soft inside.
That's true. Big teddy bear.
Big teddy
That's
bear,
true.
big teddy bear. Well,
You
Jeff,
like
good
my
to see
you
you.
like my mug? Did
Yes, way to
that
represent.
just
You're
for you.
on brand. You've got the mug, you've got your real estate company shirt, and you've got your obnoxious shoe collection,
I
all
got a
wrapped
couple.
into one.
Got a couple. Yeah, this is my office. This is my office.
All right, Jeff, I do why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself to folks in our audience that
Yeah,
don't know you, kind of what you're doing now, talk about Christina and the kiddos, and then
sure.
let's dial it all the way back to uh, teenage Jeff in Harlan, Kentucky.
Yeah, sure. So, uh, currently, once again, Jeff Howard. I'm the owner and broker of Bluff City Realty in Memphis, Tennessee. My wife Christina and I actually met in Downline, so you're going to hear a lot of Downline in my story as my testimony goes on. But super thankful to have met her in such a cool way, and we have two daughters, Gabby and Nora. Gabby is 12 and in seventh grade, and Nora is 9 in fourth grade. And so that's our family. Got a couple dogs and some other pets. And my wife would have a farm if I'd let her, to be honest with you.
You have two daughters, a wife, no money.
That's right. Yeah, they take it as fast as I can make it, I think. No, I'm very fortunate. I've got a very good crew. Very fortunate.
Yeah, you got sweet kiddos. And Christina's a school
Yeah.
teacher there in the Memphis area.
She is. She teaches kindergarten and loves it. I don't know how she does it, but she's at a Christian school here in Memphis, and so she talks all the time about how she gets to pray with kids, pray with parents, teach the Bible, teach discipleship, and we talk all the time about how she's got 20 little minions in her class, just soaking up all the grace she can give them. That age theology's hard, but we can model Christian values and
Yeah.
teach biblical principles, and so she really thrives in that opportunity to be able to educate them and teach them the love of the Lord and what the gospel means in real time. It's
Yeah,
really cool.
I thought about you. Like I was traveling 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was on a flight and found this documentary about the coal miner strike in
Oh yeah,
Harlan or that area. And so
Harlan County, USA. Yeah,
Harlan County, USA. Yes, maybe paint a little bit of a picture of the landscape you grew up in and the town and the
yeah,
environment, and then how that kind of played into some of your struggles as a teen and young adult.
yeah, man. Harlan, up until the last little bit, via Wikipedia, was the 14th poorest county in America with a median income somewhere around $18,000. That's currently. So I was there in the 80s and 90s, and we were coming out of a big coal boom. And so there was a lot of fast money that kind of went in and out there for a period of time in the 1900s that has now gone away. And so my time, as a teenager, more primarily, it was very impoverished, very low workforce with a lot of blue collar guys, people willing to work and no opportunity. So you had a lot of guys who had worked in the coal industry, had put their bodies on the line, entered the late 90s, early 2000s, what we now call the opioid epidemic was going on. And man, guys were just able to go in and go, got a ruptured disc, got of that. And pills were just everywhere. And when I was in high school, it was just kind of commonplace for people's parents to be on pills, for I mean, even kids to be on pills. They were coming from a doctor, and that was the narrative back then. It's I'm not a junkie. I'm just doing what the doctor gave me. And these were supposed to be non-addictive pain pills, OxyContin primarily. They were supposed to be, a way to treat pain without addiction. There's a lot of information now on these topics that for years just it wasn't discussed and it wasn't talked about because of the pharmaceutical industries. And so now we kind of know a lot more truth about it, and it is extremely habit forming, and it is basically heroin in a little orange bottle. And but back then people didn't know that, and it has had generational ramifications in my town and a lot of the surrounding areas in the Appalachians.
So what was your, kind of introduction to all that?
Honestly, I would love to say I was the story. I was playing football. Somebody hit me from behind, took my knee out. Man, to be honest with you, I think the sin in my heart drew me to drugs from a young age. I don't really know how to get into the conversation about, is it passed down? Is it generational? Is it, a part of our brain, that addiction? All I know is I had a sin nature in my soul, and I was
Mm.
trying to find everything I could find to fill that hole. And for some reason, drugs were very appealing to me. And the drug lifestyle and the fastness of it. Even before I knew where to get drugs or what to do with them, I just remember being enthralled with that lifestyle. And so I cannot blame a doctor. I cannot blame society. I was drawn to that as a part of my sinful desires.
So,
That's as honest as I can be. I just wanted
yeah,
drugs before I knew how to even touch them. You know,
yeah.
seventh grade,
Well,
sixth grade, I remember wanting drugs.
in fifth or sixth grade.
Hmm.
So was that,
Or just a desire for that lifestyle, watching movies, listening to music. Like I was just, that lifestyle was appealing to me.
yeah.
Not that I wanted to do drugs in fifth grade necessarily, but I was really enticed by the lifestyle. Mhm.
So when was that moment, kind of first time, or you kind of finally crossed that threshold? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember about seventh grade things changing for me. And I can say it was a part of an injury, but I don't want to paint the wrong picture as if I got tricked into taking pain pills because that's not true. I was in a bad four-wheeler wreck, and I think what happened at that moment is the Lord started taking idols from my heart. I'm from Kentucky, it's a basketball state. I was in a basketball town, and I was, a decent basketball player for several years. I hit a couple growth spurts early, and I was just, we were a good team. The group above me had won state, so they invested a lot of resources into our junior high program, like the AAU program, the traveling team. They just took our seventh and eighth grade team. We're like, all right, y'all are the regional team. Seems like you dusted through everybody. And so they were just expecting us to be similar to the team that was before us. And when I got in this four wheeler wreck, it broke my hip, and I mean my athletic career just went away just overnight. From between Thursday night and Friday morning, I went from practice every day, playing with my friends. Like we would get out of school, play basketball, go to practice, get home, watch the Bulls on WGN. Like it was my whole world, and then it was taken.
Mm.
And so when that happened, football was gone, basketball was gone. So all my friends, all my coaches, everything I had known, from first grade to eighth grade was now gone. And I just found myself with a different group of friends. And, I kind of went from the basketball player to the skateboarder just in, one small season or one semester of school. And that's where it started to shift, was that seventh, eighth grade, kind of going into high school. Who are you? And I just kind of completely was like, well, if I'm not an athlete, then I'm just one of these guys. And I just leaned into it.
Did did your mom or anyone pick up on that, or were you able to kind of compartmentalize that part of your life for a while?
That's a great question. I was scary how good I was at being two people at the same time. So I was very rebellious in one sense, but in another sense, I would like to think my teachers all liked me. I still went to school. I maintained friends. I even worked through high school. So it wasn't that it got super dark then. And so my mom got pregnant with me when she was 16, 17 years old. So it was just us for several years. My stepdad stepped in at a wonderful time, as I'm going into, middle school, and they were involved, but it wasn't something back then where people even knew what to ask necessarily, or it wasn't on the radar quite as much. So I don't want to fault her, but no, man. I mean, there were a few blips as I got later in high school, when the police got involved and stuff, where it's kind of undeniable. But my family operated on a plausible deniability for a
Mm.
lot of years, and that has been a curse in my maternal side of the family, which is all I have relationship with. And honestly, that was the biggest, enablement that I had was people were like, well, just don't ask questions and we just won't push buttons and we'll just let this thing keep going down the road. And that's something that we've had to face as a family really intensely in the last 5 years as well. Not just through me, but other family members as well. Just that, like, we've got to face this head on. And so it's been a real gift in my recovery that we've just kind of been like, you know what? We're not perfect. We don't have it all figured out. It's messy and the Lord can redeem things. So that's been a real blessing to give them credit. My
Well,
family, I mean.
well, and I think something you said is, I mean, obviously it's true for your situation, but it's true for all of us in different, sin arenas. But the human capacity to compartmentalize and endure long seasons of sin with in relative, anonymity really is striking.
Yeah, yeah, and just the way sin grows. I've heard it compared to, like, mold or mushrooms. It grows in dark places. And addictions and things categorized as sin in my heart, in my life. And man, those things, when they're hidden under that bathroom cabinet, they grow and fester and just turn into this monster. And when you shine light on it and when you bring attention to it, that's where the redemption comes in. And that's
Yeah.
so true, man.
It's that adage of it always over promises and under delivers.
Gosh, doesn't it?
All right. So just before you keep going, I know your granddad was kind of a pillar of the community, really
Yeah.
faithful believer. So it wasn't like you were in a family situation with no faith background. So, I mean, any point in any of this, are you feeling conviction or stirrings, or you're wrestling with anything spiritual?
Man, that's a question I've wrestled with for 15 years, because I can remember praying. Now, I don't know what God I was praying to, or what theology I was praying under, but I can remember wanting to pray. I think I was modeling what I'd seen my grandfather do. But man, I can say, um, let me say this. I think sometimes with young kids, we can talk them into a baptism or a salvation experience. And so I can remember a moment with my grandfather where it was kind of, I don't want to say pushed on me, but the gospel was introduced to me. And I think I was like, well, yeah, sure, Grandpa, if it makes you happy, Pop, I love you. So I had some moments like that when I was young. But man, as my life went on, and as I believe the Holy Spirit truly called me and saved me
Mm.
through an introduction to Jesus, that I realized, man, that stuff from back when I was 7 or 8, that wasn't a thing. That was just making Grandpa happy. So I don't want to fault their efforts, because I can remember him reading me Bible stories. I can remember, being intentional, when I was with them. But there wasn't really a heart change for me, even though I saw them and their generosity, my grandparents, their generosity, their service in the community, the way people looked up to them. And what I now know is discipleship. I saw through
Mm.
his life at his funeral. I saw so many young men walk up and go, Dr. Bryson was there for me. Dr. Bryson took me in. We've got a member of our family that, even hear how I introduce him. We've got a member of our family that my kids think of as their uncle, that is really just one of my uncle's best friends, who my grandparents have just always loved and cared for. And he was just at every Christmas and everything that I remember, more or less. And, his kids have grown up with my, uncle's kids and,
Mm.
my family. And so they've just modeled having people in your house. They took people in. Just a lot of the things that I base my life and my family's life after are things I saw my grandmother and grandfather do, even though I didn't have a spiritual, relationship back then. Seeing how they
Yeah,
lived out their faith has transformed who I am as an adult today. So I think the
sure.
Lord used even those times where maybe he wasn't, I wasn't his yet. I think he knew that, man, you need, and so he modeled that through them. I truly believe that.
Well, too, it's encouraging because those seeds are planted and you weren't cognizant of it, but they just bloom later. And I think we all have that hope along the way, whether it's our own kids or other people we are
Man,
walking
I've
alongside.
worked in recovery. I've worked in recovery ministries and a lot of parents go, man, I had them in church. I was reading the Bible to them. I was like, man, train a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. That doesn't say there's not a rough couple decades in the middle. It says when they're old. And I'm a walking example of my grandfather did try to train me, but I was not wanting any of the wisdom he wanted to impart, or I didn't want to live it out. And
Yeah. And
there
you
was a
are,
season where, you
well,
know,
you are a walking
prodigal.
example because you are old.
And say, look at this. I tell my
Yeah.
kids all the time, I said, I didn't have a single gray hair until y'all came around. Then they just started popping up everywhere. It started falling out. The Bible also says this is a sign of wisdom. So I'm just glad to be here.
Yeah. But see, that's a proverb, which means it's generally true, not always true.
Generally. Yeah, I'm going to hold on to it.
Yeah. But you also have a fake hip.
I do. Yeah, that's the four-wheeler wreck. Yeah, so I'm pretty old all the way around. I feel it. I feel it.
I mean, you're a pretty big guy now, but when you first moved to Memphis, I could have taken you. Now I'm not. Now I'm not so sure. You in
Yeah,
that hip, and
thankfully,
I'll kick you in that hip and run.
that's right. Thankfully, we're friends. We don't have to figure out who's going to win. I think we both end up hurting in physical therapy if we tried to
Hey,
wrestle.
hey, I tell you what. About 15 years ago, we both lost when you videoed me wrapping Vanilla Ice.
Yeah, if anybody needs that footage, I can get it to you. The director of Downline rapping Vanilla Ice at a Downline house party. I've got that footage.
That's a classic.
That's a classic.
Hey, so let's go your whatever 14, 15, 16. And at some point, you're not just consuming, right? You're selling and
Yeah.
you're in the game.
Yes.
And like, just
Yeah.
for those of us that have never walked down that road, what's that world like?
Yeah, so it just progressed really fast for me. And like I say, I was pursuing the lifestyle. About the time I get out of high school, I bounce around a little bit, and I do this classic thing that addicts like to do, where we'll try to run from our problems. So I was doing at this point OxyContin and Xanax pretty aggressively. This is 2005 or so, 2004, so shortly after high school, 20, 21 years old. And at this point, I've kind of lost a lot of who I was that I maintained throughout my high school, drug use. When I got out of high school, I mean, it was jet fuel. And so what ends up happening is I'm so addicted that, I can't really work. I can't really have a normal life. I'm blowing in and out of Christmases at my grandparents' house. Like I can't even maintain.
Hey,
And
Jeff,
financially,
at your peak, what, I mean, how much are you doing a day?
okay, yeah, great question. So OxyContin is where the ship landed. That's kind of the pinnacle of drug use at that time. And at its peak, at the end, I was doing 800 milligrams of OxyContin. So for reference, if you had a car wreck and you had some kind of extreme back surgery, you might get an OxyContin 20 to take twice a day. An extreme pain, cancer patient kind of thing, you'd take 40, 60 milligrams a day,
And you're doing 20 times
depending.
that.
I'm doing 800. So I was buying Oxy 80s, which were typically prescribed to, people who are paralyzed, cancer, deathbed scenarios. And the irony is, if you had seen me in 2006 and 7, I looked like a cancer patient. I mean, black rings around my eyes. I was pale, sunken in. I mean, it had stolen my soul. I'm
Yeah.
not kidding. And then physically dependent. I mean, it was to the point where I would have to have, pills like crushed up on my bathroom vanity. So in the middle of the night, if I got up, I'd get sick and I'd have to go do a little bit just to get me through the night. Like it was like I couldn't even sleep, a standard sleep, a drug induced sleep without waking up and needing more. And so that financially is just crippling because, I mean, at that point, street value for those Oxy 80s were $80 to $120, depending on what part of the country you're in and how
A
much
pill?
access you had. And so per pill. And so there was my means for opportunity because I was kind of running with these the Crips, these gang members from Ohio. They were getting them, and the more I bought, the cheaper I got them. And I was living in Lexington, Kentucky at the time, where University of Kentucky is, and so if I bought enough, I'd get them cheap. And so, I was buying hundreds at a time. So I could get them for $50, $55 and then sell them around town for 80. And if I drove them to Harlan, I could get 100 or 120 a pill, depending on how many I was selling. And so that was the only way I was able to afford the lifestyle. I did like being a drug dealer, if I'm honest. I liked the things that came with it. Like I say, I was drawn to that from the time I was a kid. but I didn't get to enjoy it because it's like everything that came in went straight back in. All the money that came in went straight back in. And so that's where the extreme tolerance and the more you do, the more you have to do. It's just like any addiction. It's like, what gets you by with this today needs to be that much tomorrow. And that's where the sin really took over, is just, a little bit was never enough, and too much was always left me wanting a little more. Like no matter how much I had, there was always more to get. And man, that's where it turned into being the drug dealer. Is my tolerance just got to a point where it's like no typical job could afford this. Like it had to be my lifestyle. And every single day, every minute of the day, how do I get them? How do I get the money to get them? How do I sell them? How do I use them? How do I recover from the day before? How do I get enough to get through the next day? How do I hide from the people I owe money to? How do I hide from the cops? How do I keep my story straight with my family, my friends? And it was just a tumultuous existence for a human soul to go through all alone without any kind of dependence on community or any type of spiritual, foundation.
Sure.
It was just lonely, it's like death every day.
So now in kind of part 2 in our next episode, we're going to talk about how God saved you and that journey. But before we get there, what's the breaking point? Like somebody gets in the spot you were in, and I remember, and I do want you to share. I mean, I know at one point
Yeah.
you tried to detox yourself.
Especially at those levels with those types of drugs. Yeah,
Sure.
it's bad.
But I know, at some point there's an arrest, there's a detox, there is a breaking point for you where at some point you got to go, I'm either going to die or I'm going to change.
Yeah. For me, it was a long road because I was able to be a successful drug user for a few years. I say successful with air quotes all the way around it. I was able to fuel my own addiction because I had connections. And like I say, I was, basically a professional drug addict at that point. My whole life went from, kind of not glamorous drug dealer, but, drug dealing lifestyle to completely broken and alone in about 2 weeks. Because when you live that lifestyle, you're only as good as how much you have, how loud the music is, how many, it's like you have to maintain this lifestyle where people aren't around. They're not around for Jeff Howard. They don't care about who I am. They don't love my family. They don't have, compassion for me as a person or a friend, or these relationships are transactional. And so that's why it's so lonely. And so in that 2 weeks, a lot happened. And that was definitely where the Lord was like, because what happened is I get arrested, which was not completely uncommon, in that lifestyle, but this was a good one. I was a part of a task force bust. So yeah, they knew my name. They knew my car, unmarked, the whole deal. I went to buy some stuff. I joke. The guy's name was Joe. I'm not going to say his last name. Not that he's listening to this, but hope he is. That'd be amazing. Joe turned me in and told on me. And so the way the task force was working, they would get this guy would turn in that guy, and then he would get a less sentence. And then they would try to work their way all the way up to get to me, to the guys in Ohio, and then figure out who's above them. That was their aim. Well, I never talked on the phone because I was so paranoid. And so Joe calls me over and asked me to bring him X number of whatever pill. They never knew whether I had the pill or whether I was going to get the money and then go get the pills and bring them the pills back. Like it was just this, you just had to call me and you figured out what I had to offer when I got there. And so he called me, and I pull out of his little townhouse community and I get pulled over right away. And so right away, I know they're on me. They got me. Mm-hmm. And so I get arrested. They start ripping the carpet out of my car. And what's ironic, Jamie, is I didn't have any drugs. I just had, at that point, everybody wore cargo shorts. It's the early 2000s.
Oh my God.
I had I had a wad of money and these big baggy cargo shorts and nothing on me because I was going to buy, I think it was 100 or so Oxy 80s. And so anyway, they arrest me. I had drug paraphernalia, and so they get me on that. And then in subsequent weeks, I can't just stop this, even though I know there's a task force after me. I'm still, I've got to maintain. I can't even function a few hours without these things. And so they end up getting me a few times, and I get arrested with intent to distribute. And at that point, you could get, in Kentucky, you could get up to 10 years per Oxy 80. Like if a judge wanted to just throw the book at you. And so I'm looking at some really significant time. And so this is all a 2-week span. This task force is just following me around and, my car and probably on my phone, who knows. And I get arrested, and I'm able to bond myself out because I've got, drug money. Well, then what happens is fortunately, I was never put in a position to have to, tell, snitch. It just didn't work out to where they offered me anything. I don't think they ever got me with enough substance to get there. Thank the Lord, I didn't get put in that position and have to. And so I was kind of a solo trial. And what ended up happening though, while I was in jail for that short little stint, is they did get the guys who I bought off of. And so then I get out of jail. And so now I've spent my money, bailing myself out. So I don't have as much re-up money. And then the guys I was buying off of. So I end up getting sick, man, like detox, sick, bad, like just. And so my grandfather was in the hospital. This is a real dark part of the story. Not the same grandfather that, was teaching me the Bible. My father's father was in the hospital, and he calls me in, and he's like, man, it's the big C. And he tells me he's got cancer, and he was just always having heart trouble or something. Just, I didn't think much of it.
Yeah.
What I did think is, I know where his checkbook is, and I know where his hide key is. And I started floating checks to myself. And my grandfather died 9 days after he talked to me. So, you've heard that adage, like, he's so terrible he'd steal off somebody on their deathbed. Well, man, it's taken a lot of self work and therapy and care to tell this story the right way. Man. I stole off my grandfather, who would have given me anything. I stole off that man while he was on his deathbed. So instead of sitting with him and asking him stories about the war and his parents, how he grew up, I was just stealing what he had in his checking account every chance I got. Jeff Howard, 500. Jeff Howard, 600. Well, after he passes, my family takes over his accounts, and it's no secret. I'm a junkie. It's not I'm maintaining anymore. It's not that I'm paying my own rent. I am stealing off my grandpa. And so that's the point where my family was like, okay, what is going on? And so that was the point for me. It was legal. It was what I believe to be spiritual calling, in the midst of my drug addiction. And then now my family's involved. So I literally have nowhere to hide. I have nowhere to run. I can't lie to myself anymore. It's just, I can't even use anymore. I'm sick. I'm, ripping off drug dealers, hiding from gang members. It's a dark, dark fall of 2007 for me.
All right. So we're going to press pause in that darkness of 2007. And I really appreciate your time. We're going to come back for a part 2 and pick the story up and see how God kind of works all this darkness. And, it's fitting. I mean, obviously it's theologically true, but just as a example in John chapter 1, when it talks about, Jesus is the light and the light penetrates the darkness. And it says, and the darkness has not overcome it, which is, I know, a big part of it's true of all of our stories. Some of ours just kind of sound a little more dramatic than others, but anyways, Jeff, thanks for your time. We're going to pick right back up here in the next episode.
You have to promise to listen to part 2 if you heard the muck and mire of part 1. That's got to be the commitment. That's right. Come back for the good news. Yeah, that's right.
All right. See you,
Thank
Jeff.
you, guys.